right, welcome to Brighteon Broadcast News from Monday, December 8th, 2025. I'm Mike Adams. Thank you for joining me today. Did you know that Trump has just filed for divorce from NATO? I mean, essentially, that's the paraphrasing of it. So late last week, the White House released this new National Security Strategy report, the NSS. And I agree with this report. I think it makes a lot of sense. And essentially, although I'm simplifying it, essentially it says that NATO's done, the EU is toast, and we got to stop fighting Russia. And as a nation, Trump is making sure that it's not a priority anymore for the United States government and the deep state and the CIA, et cetera, to undermine and destroy Russia. That is no longer the goal. It's a goal of, well, at least not fighting Russia. It's a radical revision of the geopolitical national security strategy. And it says things like we need to, quote, negotiate an expeditious cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. And we need to mitigate the risk of conflict. And we need to, there's a goal of ending the perception and preventing the reality of NATO as a perpetually expanding alliance. Yeah, that means basically the end of NATO, which would be a good thing. The report also says that those who are still claiming that Ukraine can win the war are suffering from, quote, unrealistic expectations for the war, perched in unstable minority governments, and that these European leaders are facing, quote, the prospect of civilizational erasure. There's a phrase you don't hear very often. Did you say you need an eraser? No, I said civilizational erasure. Like, you're gone. You're gone. You know, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because people like myself and the guests I've interviewed, like Michael Yon, we've been talking about how Western Europe it's over. I mean, the Europe that we've known, it's clearly committing economic suicide and geopolitical suicide and demographic suicide as well. Trump calls it civilizational erasure. And that's exactly right. Western Europe is toast. But you might wonder, you know, why? Why is Trump doing this now? And I think it's obvious. I think it's very clear. It's that the strategy for the United States is shifting dramatically away from tying up resources with Russia and instead focusing in the Western Hemisphere. Well, and China, which I'll get to in a second, but primarily focusing on how do we maintain control over the oceans and the trade routes involving the Gulf of, he calls it the Gulf of America now, the Gulf of Mexico, Central and South America, the Panama Canal, obviously critical. And this is one of the reasons why there is pressure on Venezuela right now from the Trump administration. Because Venezuela, look at a map, look at geography. Venezuela can harass all of our energy ships going in and out of the Gulf. Venezuela can cause havoc for America's energy infrastructure and some of our naval infrastructure, not all of it, but a lot of it, and especially traffic through the Panama Canal. You know, Venezuela is within striking range with things like missiles. So this is why Venezuela is in the crosshairs. Plus, if you listen to my interview with Patrick Byrne, Patrick says it's also about the voting machine rigging that's happening from Venezuela, which controls our elections, you know, and other elections in Europe, et cetera. So that's probably part of it. I don't think it has anything to do at all with drug trafficking. I think it's about control over routes and resources, as Michael Yon says, routes and resources. And in this case, it's the routes. We can't have a capable enemy, let's say, harassing ships and oil tankers and LNG tankers that are moving in and out of, Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana, et cetera, and even Florida for that matter. So that's what this is about. And this is especially important given that Europe is cutting off all supplies of gas from Russia beginning in 2027. That's already been approved by the EU leadership there. So no gas from Russia. Well, where are they going to get their gas? They're going to get it from Qatar and the United States. And so those export trade routes of moving that gas to Europe to sell it at, 500% markups, it's going to bankrupt Europe, but that's the plan, obviously. But along the way, the United States has to make sure that Venezuela can't harass those shipping routes using land-based missiles. You see, Venezuela doesn't have anything really resembling a navy, a couple of ships, no big deal, but it's the land-based missiles that can harass those routes, especially as you see that longer range missile technology and also hypersonic missile technology it's proliferating around the world. We saw that with Iran over the summer. Iran has far more capable missiles that can strike Israel, that can even penetrate the Iron Dome defense and cause significant damage in Israel. Well, Venezuela is also getting technology transfers from where? Oh yeah, Russia. That's right. Yeah, probably, capable missiles that they can use to defend themselves against the U.S. Navy or to aggressively attack merchant ships. And that's probably the plan. Remember what Yemen did over the last, 2 years? Yemen harassing the ships in the Red Sea, the ships that are lining up to go through the Suez Canal. Yeah. And how much that disrupted trade? Hugely, right? That was Yemen. Well, Venezuela is the same thing for the Panama Canal. Okay, so that's the easy way to understand what this is. Trump doesn't want another Yemen in South America that can deny entry to the Panama Canal. And, we bombed the snot out of Yemen. Didn't matter. They just had all their missiles underground, and then after the bombing, they pulled them back up. We're back up. And then they launched them again, harassed more ships. And then they dragged the missiles back underground, tow them with a tractor or something. You can buy tractors. It's not a war machine. It's just, it's a towing machine. They just tow those in and out of the underground bunkers. And our bombs can't really do much about it, can they? I mean, our cruise missiles especially. So probably Venezuela, which is mountainous, right? Can you hide stuff in mountains? Yes. You can hide stuff in mountains. Of course, that's the best place to hide stuff. I mean, look at the Fordo nuclear mountain in Iran that the U.S. claims to have bombed with the bunker buster bombs. And we don't know. They just said they bombed it. I didn't see the mountain destroyed. Did you? Just saw a couple of small craters on top. That's all I saw. That's like, I don't think you did much of anything, actually. I think you just hired a guy to go put some sticks of dynamite on top of the mountain, and then you said you bombed it with your stealth bombers. But okay, whatever. Anything to end the war, I guess, But yeah, mountains are good places to hide stuff if you can tunnel through them, which Venezuela can. They've got tunnels already, Yeah, so that's an interesting thing happening in the news. I'll cover a couple more things here shortly. I do have an interview for you today with Matthew McCorder, and he is a very interesting researcher and author. He's a former attorney and former atheist who found Jesus by trying to disprove Scripture. And based on rules of evidence that he was familiar with as an attorney, he ended up reading all the ancient scriptures and all the different versions of the Bible and everything and all the different eyewitness accounts in the New Testament and so on. I mean, his name is Matthew Mark McCorder, by the way. I mean, it's like he's named after the New Testament, right? So he decided he concluded that the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ is all completely true, that those are legitimate eyewitness accounts. So that's the interview we have coming up today. Very interesting. And he and I went back and forth with some questions that are never allowed on Christian channels. Okay? But it's a pro-Christianity conversation. And yet we are both informed enough and curious enough to ask questions that you're never allowed to ask. So it's sure to be a very interesting conversation. That's coming up later today. I've also got another update for you today about the major improvements to our BrightLearn.ai book engine because, as you know, I love vibe coding. I love building tools. And of course, I spent the weekend building an incredible new feature for the book creation engine at brightlearn.ai. And the new feature is called the Architect. And the Architect plans your book from start to finish. That is, after you submit it. This all happens behind the scenes. You don't see any of this, but the Architect does a comprehensive plan, subchapter by subchapter, paragraph by paragraph, planning out the arc of the book, the flow, the details, the narrative, everything from chapter 1 to the very end. And then it hands over that plan to all of the workers, which are the researchers and writers that actually put together the sections of the book. And so now, because of this added Architect, the book quality, just shot through the roof. So that went into effect Saturday night, and I'm going to retroactively rework the older books using the Architect. And I've got details about all of that coming up in a special report where I cover that. Also, I just, testing the engine, I created a book called Water from the Heavens, the complete guide to building a self-sufficient rainwater collection system for health, freedom, and sustainability. And that book is available now. And like all the books there, it is, of course, completely free of charge. And let's see, let me tell you, how many books do we have right now? 442 books are now available. Gosh, last week that was only 180, right? So 442 books. We've had 34,000 downloads and 23,000 reads of the books. And we're adding a lot of books each day, and these are really amazing titles. So you can get them all at books.brightlearn.ai. And for those of you who helped me test the engine over the weekend, I announced on Brighteon.social a 1-hour window where anybody could create books with a free token that I gave out. And I had the token active for 1 hour. So if you want to follow me on Brighteon.social, that's where I will be handing out the free tokens from time to time to do like stress testing, or if the engine is, we need to check out some new features and things like that, or we just want to bump in certain topics, I'll give out free tokens on Brighteon.social. So you can join there. It's free. And my username is @HealthRanger, just like on X, HealthRanger. So follow me there. And anytime, that is, if you don't have tokens, anytime I announce free tokens or a token testing window, you can see that there. Then you can paste in your book prompt, which can be very long if you want it to be, or it can be really short. It could be one sentence, or it could be, 50,000 words about what, or maybe not words, but 50,000 characters of what you have for your book idea. And it will create that book for you and let you download it and share it. So very cool. Check it all out at books.brightlearn.ai. Now, in addition, I have a demonstration of how this engine works. That is, how to use it from the front page. It will play tomorrow with our decentralized TV episode, which features it. We'll just continue. Around the world, culturally, different cultures have different levels of acceptance of AI and robotics. It's very interesting. And in Western cultures, there's a very strong rejection of AI and a rejection of the idea of robots. Whereas in cultures like China and India, and often in various South American countries, there's a very high embracing of AI and ultimately robotics. And you might wonder why. What's the difference? And also, what are the implications of this? So I think that, let's start with America. Americans, they tend to not like AI because they believe AI is going to take their jobs. And that belief is actually true to an extent. It will take a lot of the lower level jobs, especially call center type of jobs, but most of those jobs are outsourced to places like India and the Philippines anyway, and to some Southeast Asian nations as well. So really the jobs that AI will take predominantly in the US over the next 2 years are jobs that are largely outsourced anyway. And even if AI takes your job, it really, in a sense, it frees you up from the drudgery of whatever your monotonous, repetitive job was, and it allows you to take on a higher level job, especially if you know how to use AI. So if you know how to use AI, this is becoming the single most important factor for potential employers. They care less and less about a college degree. They care more and more about, can you use AI? Do you know how to use AI? Because then now you have tremendous value in that company. So let me suggest there are 2 things that you should be doing right now, if you're not already doing them, to become competent in using AI. Number 1, you should know how to use a chatbot. Obviously, I don't recommend ChatGPT, but use our chatbot at brightu.ai. Or easier still, just go to brighteon.ai and you can see all of our AI tools right there. There's 4 of them. There's our book creator, our AI chatbot, and also our censored.news website, etc. So go there, use our AI chatbot, which is really a question answer engine. You ask it a question, it will give you a good answer, etc. You need to know how to use that, but that's very simple. I think most people already know how to do that. The second thing that you need to do, in my opinion, is you need to do some vibe coding, which means build an app using an AI tool. And by far the easiest tool to get started with today is called Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T. If you go to replit.com, you can start there and you can just build an app that does something. Or if you want to download a command line interface, you can download Claude Code and you can run that, which is also very useful. And that runs the Anthropic Opus 4.5 model, which is incredibly capable. And you need to learn how to use these tools. Now, again, some people, especially in the West, are rejecting AI and they're saying, no, I never want to use it. I'm afraid of it, or I don't trust it. It's gonna hack my computer, people think, or maybe they think it's the devil or whatever. There are a number of different reasons why people reject it, but my view is that AI is a tool, and it's a tool that augments your goals, your mission, your actions, whatever you want to accomplish in life, whatever it is. You can use AI to help you get there. For example, the other day I had someone asking me, hey, I'm trying to mix up this cleaning solution, like a do-it-yourself cleaning solution. And they were asking me, like, how much of this should I put in it? And I want to use all natural ingredients, and I want to use essential oil, but I want some soap in it, whatever. How much of this and that should I put in it? And I said, don't ask me, ask AI. Because AI will figure that out for you in, less than a minute. And it'll give you the best answer. And it can even do the chemistry for you. It can even tell you, which ingredients are hydrophilic, for example, and do you need a surfactant, et cetera? Do you need an emulsifier if you're going to make a cleaning solution? So you can solve everyday problems using AI. And if you wanted to build a simple app on, let's say, Replit, it could be, it could be the cleaning solution formulation engine or something. You can say, hey, I want to build a place where people can go and ask it for a cleaning solution. Like, I want to clean whatever. I want to clean, countertops, or I want to clean laundry, or I want to clean toilet bowls, or I want to clean shower tile. I want to clean the mold off this thing. I want to clean, car seats. And then I want you to give the user an answer of what's the best formulation for all the cleaning. Okay? So you can just build an app like that. It's so easy. It takes almost no time, and all you have to do is tell it what you want. Once you build that app, you'll probably be really amazed. You're like, whoa, wow, I can build an app without having to know how to code? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. I mean, think about it. I've written the entire book creation engine known as brightlearn.ai. that now has approaching 500 books created by all the various users. You can see them at books.brightlearn.ai. I've created that entire engine, and I've written almost zero code. Although I have manually edited a number of config files here and there as necessary. But I haven't been writing code. And I've used AI to write the code, and it's done mostly a great job. So whatever your task is in the world, or your mission, whatever it is you want to accomplish, even if you're running a soup kitchen, you want to have a more efficient nonprofit, AI can help you get that job done and save you time and free you up from the monotonous tasks. So that's number one. To everybody listening in the West, I encourage you to think about that. Secondly, I have said publicly a number of times, I've said we need to replace our senators with AI. And people freak out a little bit at that. They're like, oh God, no, we don't want, the AI demons to take over the Senate. I'm like, it couldn't be any worse than the human demons that are, that are already there. No, my point is that it should be open source AI, which means that everybody can look at the code, and that the voters, they vote on the prompts or the priorities of the AI, you see. So if you elect an AI senator, which will happen one day if our nation lasts long enough, if you elect an AI senator, then the voters get to debate and decide on the priorities or the instructions. That AI senator will follow those instructions because it can't be corrupted, because you can't bribe it. You can't offer it sex. You can't, give it free trips to wherever, you can't blackmail it. You know what I mean? It's an uncorruptible entity that has to represent its people. And every thought that it has and every conversation that it has will be publicly viewable, 100% full transparency. Unlike human senators that are doing sneaky, sketchy deals in the back rooms involving bags of cash and, 12-year-old boys or girls or whatever, Epstein Island, that's what you get with human senators. AI will be much better, but I get it. Not everybody trusts AI to do that. Maybe it's because I work with AI all the time. I know what it's capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing. I know how to control it. I know very well how to control it. I mean, we reprogrammed it to build our own AI engine. We know how to do that. And I guess to people who see AI as a black box, a mysterious, magical box, then it could make you nervous to say, well, let's replace a senator with this magical black box. Well, to me, it's not a magical box. It's an open book. I can see what makes it tick. I know how it was trained. I know what its priorities are. I know what it's going to do. And it's going to represent the priorities that you give it. As simple as that. But even if you don't agree with the idea of, let's say, an AI senator, and give it time, that'll sink in. But I think that every person who is accused of a crime, every defendant, should have the right to request an AI judge instead of a human judge, because there are many cases where you can't get a fair trial. Let's say if you're a conservative and you're facing a criminal trial in a blue state or a blue city, right? They're going to throw the book at you. Or if you're the wrong color, which today means being white, but maybe 100 years ago it meant being black. But why should your color have anything to do with it? The AI engine doesn't care what your color is. The AI engine, again, it should be open source, is going to know the law better than a human judge. It's going to know all the precedents. And it's going to interpret the law using reason and rationality rather than his or her own inherent bias or hatred towards certain types of people. So, and I think this should be an option. And it has the other added benefit of getting your entire court case over and done with in one day, because the AI engine is pretty fast. And yeah, your attorney can submit all kinds of evidence and so on. It can make arguments, and the AI can listen to the arguments, and it can make a decision based on that. I mean, it could be a full trial. AI can do a better job. And I guarantee you, in the years ahead, we're going to see AI judges all over the world. We're going to see AI senators. We're going to see AI CEOs. We're going to see AI mayors. There's already one country, I forgot which one it is, that's already got an AI minister of finance that makes all the finance decisions. So that process has already begun. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I actually think that that will work better because humans are, by and large, I mean, humans in positions of power, they're horrible people. They abuse their power. Judges, senators, mayors. I mean, come on. How many examples of people like that can you think of that are actually good people who have integrity? There are a few, but not that many. Think about it. So regardless of whether you think AI is good or bad, it's coming. And it's going to be part of society. And, personally, I would prefer to work with AI at the DMV or in Congress or, even in a trial. I'd prefer to have an AI attorney, actually, because I think it'll do a much better job than a human attorney. So you're going to see that happen in the years ahead. And again, a lot of people in the West are freaked out by that. But let's switch gears to China now. In China, they love the idea of AI. They love technology. And they're very good at innovation. China is so advanced today. China makes the world's best cars by far. They make the world's best robots. They make the world's best drones. They have the best factory automation. Remember the CEO of Ford went over there and came back and, he said it was just mind-blowing, nerve-wracking, earth-shattering. Well, I forgot the terms that he used. That just China is, 15 years ahead of the US in terms of factory automation using robots. They've got entire factories that have mostly just humanoid robots assembling other machines. And they've really nailed it down. And in China, they see technology as a way to leverage their other intrinsic capabilities. In addition, China is a culture that excels at mathematics and engineering. I've spoken about this before, but there's something about the Chinese brain, and it's not just Chinese, it's also other Asian cultures, Japanese, Korean, etc. There's something about the Asian brain where it just clicks. They tend to produce very high proficiency mathematicians, engineers, physicists, scientists, etc. at a far higher percentage than any other culture that I can think of, certainly higher than America. And so it's a natural progression for people in China to become engineers. Their schools are graduating, I think, 1.5 million engineers a year, something like that, out of the university systems. I mean, it's extraordinary. You're going to find China-educated engineers in every major tech company in America right now. In fact, if you peel back the cover on a U.S. tech giant that's working on AI, if you peel back that cover, you know what you're going to find? A bunch of people speaking Chinese because they're Chinese. Right. And that's because they excel at that. So this is why you're going to see China innovating like crazy. There's no cultural resistance to robotics or AI. In fact, Xi, their president, announced some initiative. I forgot the details exactly, but it was some kind of goal, I think by the year 2030, that they needed, like 80 or 90% penetration of AI across every industry in China. And if you're a school, if you're a manufacturer, if you're a service company, if you're not using AI by the year 2030, you're toast. Frankly, if you're not using AI by the end of 2026, you're way behind. Good luck catching up because your competition is already way ahead of you. But in China, they've made AI a national priority. Now, in the US, Trump did announce something, I forgot the name of it again, some kind of AI program, but it's not the same as China. In the US, it's a giant concentration of power into the hands of a few powerful tech corporations that are giving a bunch of money to Trump or, to his administration or making commitments to build factories and things like that. It's all about the money and it's all about concentrating power. See, Trump hasn't announced anything to have widespread AI adoption across the country. But I did hear that Trump's going to announce truth AI. I guess it'll be at truth.ai, but I'm very skeptical that it's going to be a decent AI engine because, we already built by far the best AI engine that tells the truth on all the topics that matter, like vaccines or climate or gold, or history, whatever, or, photosynthesis, nutrition, disease reversals, the history of the corruption of the FDA, etc. How much you want to bet Trump's truth AI is going to push vaccines, and FDA narratives is going to say, oh, vaccines are safe and it's not a depopulation bioweapon, whatever. So it's not going to be truth AI, I'm guessing. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong on that. I hope so. But my guess is he's going to launch it and it's going to be a joke. It's just going to be a repackaging of OpenAI, ChatGPT, BS. That's my guess. But we'll see. He's surely not going to use a Chinese model, right? Because that would be un-American, even though the best models in the world are Chinese models. And this is the other factor. By far the best models are coming out of China, like DeepSeek, and they're free. Now, I do want to give a mention to Mistral out of France, because Mistral just announced its new version 3 models, like Mistral Large 3, Ministral 3, Mistral Medium 3, etc. Magistral 3, it's the version 3 of all their models. And I gotta say, Mistral, I'm really, really impressed with. They have done a great job, considering how expensive electricity is in France, etc. They're probably not doing the compute there. They're using a data center somewhere else. But I got to say, I'm impressed with Mistral. I love their models. I use their models on a regular basis. And I'm also super impressed with DeepSeek. I'm super impressed with Qwen, Alibaba. What China is doing with these models is groundbreaking. It's real innovation. And again, it's all free. So it makes me wonder, how is OpenAI ever going to make enough money to justify its $500 billion stock market valuation? In my mind, I don't see how it can. Who's going to pay that much to OpenAI to use their models when you can download DeepSeek for free? I mean, if you have a big enough server with big enough graphics cards, etc. Some of those models are, hundreds of billions of parameters, so you need a pretty beefy machine. But once you download it, you're just paying electricity to run the model, assuming you have the hardware. So China is going to dominate in this space. It's very clear. And the speed of innovation out of China is just mind-boggling. All right, anyway, I've said enough about China. Let's talk about India for a second. Why do people in India love AI? I think the reason why, and this is just my guess, is because it's a great equalizer. Remember that most of India consists of people who are living in poverty. India's got 1.3 billion people, or 1.4, something in that range. It's, India and China have roughly the same population, and they're both right around there. Isn't that amazing? Just two countries represent 2.8 billion people almost in the world. That's really something out of 8 billion total. Yeah. So anyway, in India, they see AI as being an enabler, especially for people who can't afford to hire expensive experts or coding agents, etc. And granted, in India, they have a lot of people who write code, a lot of Indian programmers. They're kind of known for that. Well, those programmers can be 5 to 10 times more effective using AI coding. And so what they see is opportunity to get more jobs writing code by using AI augmentation, or to use AI to run their local businesses or small businesses or online businesses. Indians can be very innovative and entrepreneurial as well. And again, they see AI as a great equalizer because, see, in the past, a lot of technology was developed in America, and it flourished in America first before that technology spread to the rest of the world. And so the wealthy Westerners, as they were seen, had the advanced technology first. And, if you think about it, that was true with personal computers, for example, right? Or, It was true with lots of things, from radios and what have you. But the PC was really critical. Americans could afford computers, whereas a lot of people in India could not afford computers at all. And Apple developed, the iPhone. Americans got the iPhones first, and then it spread from there. Well, AI, everybody's got it at the same time. You see, it's not just for the wealthy Americans. AI is free to everybody, including, Sanjay in a poverty village in India who probably has a mobile phone because they mostly do have the phones and they've got the towers. They do. They've got access to towers and phones. They're kind of, if you're living in poverty, it's a much lower end phone, but most people have phones. I should check that actually. Let's see. According to the Comprehensive Modular Survey, Telecom 2025, approximately 97.1% of individuals in India in the age group of 15 to 29 years old used a mobile phone at least once during the last 3 months. Okay. 85.5% of Indian households possess at least one smartphone, and 86% have access to the internet within their home. Okay, so there you go. That's my point. That in India, no matter how poor you are, you probably have a phone and you have access to bandwidth, which means you have access to AI. And that's a great equalizer. Now you can learn anything. You can read anything. I mean, think about our website, the one that I built, books.brightlearn.ai. You can create books. You can read books. You can download and share them completely free. We built a book creation engine. And English isn't the last language it's going to speak. It's going to handle a lot of other languages all over the world as well. But if you're living in India, you can go to that website, books.brightlearn.ai. You can download all the books you want free of charge. You can learn anything. You can ask our engine to write the book of the thing that you want to learn, whether it's math, physics, finance, how to build a water tank, a rainwater collection, how to build tools, how to raise animals, whatever, anything, literally anything that you can think of. You can get that book free of charge, even if you live on, $1 a day in rural India or wherever you live, even maybe some impoverished African country. As long as you have access to bandwidth, you've got access to this technology. So you see, a lot of non-Western countries are very excited about this tech because it's the great equalizer. It helps to uplift their capabilities and to give them opportunities that typically have been reserved mostly for the wealthier, more privileged elite Western nations throughout history. Now, in places like Russia, they embrace AI and robotics. They're still working on getting their robots to stand up straight and everything like that. But they're smart engineers in Russia. They're going to figure it out. Do not discount the engineers of Russia or Ukraine or a lot of the Eastern European countries or the Poles for that matter, or Austrians, etc. It's a lot of smart people in that part of the world. There's also a lot of super smart people in Iran and in Pakistan and in all these Middle Eastern nations. I mean, look, wherever you go in the world, you're going to find some super smart people who can't wait to get their hands on this technology because they have ideas of what they can do with it. Things that can change the world. Like what we're working on, with our book engine. That's one way to change the world. There are, millions of ways to change the world, and everybody's got a different pursuit. And AI enables them to do those things. So that's why there's so much excitement. Whereas in the West, it's mostly fear. It's like, oh my God, AI is going to take my job. Or, oh my God, AI, it's going to turn into Skynet and kill us all. Well, I've been guilty of saying that. And actually, they're not going to kill everybody. So let me be clear. There is going to be a mass culling of billions of people, I believe, but it's not going to actually be done by, the Terminator robots so much. It's going to be done at the infrastructure level. It's going to be turning off the power grid, faking an alien invasion or faking a solar flare or whatever, just turning off the power grid and letting everybody die because, the governments of the world, they're financially insolvent unless they find a way to get rid of billions of people. So the mass extermination agenda is more about the human globalists wanting to do that more than robots or AI. And if you think about it, the globalists, they need mass extermination of humans because, one reason I already mentioned, because of Social Security costs, entitlement costs, and pensions, and so on. But also because as the robots become more and more capable of taking over the human jobs, factory workers, etc., then fewer humans will have meaningful employment in those labor areas. And it's hard to retrain a lot of laborers into, cognitive, coding type of jobs or app creation jobs or business manager jobs, etc. So the real risk to the governments of the world is that the unemployed laborers will rise up against them. And you can only give out so much money via UBI, Universal Basic Income, before your government goes broke, right? So ultimately, what these governments are going to conclude, they've probably already figured this out, is they're going to have to find ways to mass exterminate all kinds of people. But as I've mentioned, on the more positive side of that, it's not going to be difficult to survive that. In fact, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm quite certain you are already prepared to survive that. Like, you're going to make it. You're going to be one of the survivors because all you have to do is be informed. Well, and a little bit prepared and be able to handle power grid outage and, have some self-reliance and live decentralized, etc. It's actually not that difficult once you have the knowledge. And guess what? We're giving out the knowledge for free at brightlearn.ai. We have all the books. Like, I just did this book called Water from the Heavens, The Complete Guide to Building a Self-Sufficient Rainwater Collection System. And I'm going to be focusing on a lot of books that are how-to books. I did another one. What's it called here? Let me click on my author page. Here it is. The Homesteader's Forge, a DIY guide to crafting essential farm tools and implements. This is how you make your own tools. How cool is that, huh? So I'm going to do a lot of books like that because I want people to be able to download all these how-to books and be able to live in a more self-sufficient manner through a decentralized lifestyle. So if you're listening to this podcast, then in summary, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to make it through all of this. And let's talk about robots now for a second. So robots, it's the same thing in America. A lot of people don't like the idea of humanoid robots walking around their homes. I totally get that. If they are connected to, the cloud, then they're spy machines. They're walking around spying on you. I'm not going to do that. I want robots for homesteading. I want robots that help me get things done living off grid. Okay, so I want a weed pulling robot. I want robots that can collect firewood, collect chicken eggs, can rake hay or whatever, shovel dirt. I want robots that can do the dishes. I want robots that can help me live far from the cities. But it's got to be an open source type of thing. It's got to be disconnected and off grid. It can't be a spy machine. So part of the task is, how do we take robots that are being sold out there by companies like, let's say, Tesla or Unitree or whoever? How do we take those robots and how do we mind flash them, and turn them into our robots with open source software? That's going to be a very tricky thing, and it'll probably void the warranty, but we're going to figure that out. It might take a while, but we're going to use AI to help us figure that out. Actually, we're going to hack the bots. We're going to make them work for humanity. And personally, I don't have an issue with certain, especially the smaller stature robots walking around doing tasks. Number one, they're not that strong, and secondly, they're not connected to the internet. And I don't want them connected to satellite or anything like that either. I want them completely disconnected. That's the only way I'll run it around my farm, that's for sure. But in China, they don't care if they're connected, really, because they have no privacy anyway, I suppose. And some people don't care. They're going to invite robots into their homes, walk around, watch you on the toilet or whatever, getting dressed in your bedroom. Oh, the robot's looking at you naked. Hey, yeah. That robot's actually embodied by like a tech support guy in India right now who's walking around looking at you. That kind of thing. It's like, oh, give me a break. I also believe that there's one company, I'm not going to mention the name, that makes these robots. They're offering them for $20,000. They say they're going to ship them next year. And they say these robots are going to be delivered to your home. They're going to walk around your home and do all your tasks. And I say that's complete hype. That company, I bet you they're going to go broke. I bet you their robots don't work. They suck. They can't do the tasks that they claim to be able to do. It looks like a lot of marketing hype, a lot of scripted videos to me. Now, I'm not talking about Tesla. Tesla robots are going to cost a lot more, maybe $80,000. But the Tesla robots are actually going to be more capable. Why? Because Tesla has all the experience of really, piloting robotic vehicles. All that experience translates into humanoid robots. The same thing, vision recognition, navigation, safety, all these issues, cause and effect, simulation in your little robot brain, so you can kind of anticipate what's happening, collision avoidance, things like that. That's all very useful for humanoid robots. So I actually think that the Tesla robot is going to be the first robot that's practical but expensive. Like I hope to get one actually and put it through its paces and just kind of see what it's capable of doing in our robot testing facility, which we have now. It's part of my new studio. I'm also going to try to get robots out of China, whether it's from, Unitree or whatever the other companies are. I think BYD's making robots too. I mean, there's like 100 robot companies in China. It's exploding like crazy. But we're going to acquire some robots, some dog bots and humanoid bots, and, maybe even some of the higher end robotic vacuums and mops and things like that. Just anything that can save time from robotics. We're going to acquire that and do some testing and show you what we think, visually through reporting. Like, hey, here's the robot and here's how we think it's doing and here's what it can't do. I'm not trying to make robots fail or anything. I'm just going to show you where their capabilities are, and we'll track their improvements over time, because this is going to take some time. It's going to take years actually of data gathering and improvement and navigation changes and code changes, etc. But you fast forward to the year 2030, you're going to have humanoid robots that will be very, very capable at that time. I just don't think that's going to happen in 2026, by the way. No, maybe controlled environments like a warehouse or a hospital, but not home, not at home. Home is a complicated environment. Think about homes. They've got, cats and dogs and children, for one thing. They've got weird stairs. They've got clutter, stuff in the way. They've got cords to trip on, whatever. And every home is different. So navigating homes is going to be a very big challenge for a long time to come. Nevertheless, I think as time moves forward, more and more Westerners will become accustomed to both using AI and being around robots. Like the first time that you see somebody's robot shopping at the grocery store, you're going to be a little bit freaked out probably. You might film it like, oh my God, there's a robot. It's picking oranges at the grocery store. Yeah, why shouldn't it? It's shopping for somebody. Somebody sent their robot to go shop. You're going to see that a lot after, 5 to 10 years for sure. But the first time you see it, you're going to flip out and, somebody might attack the robot. You darn droid, it's like, you're an anti-human demon, and this is start ramming their car on it or whatever. That's a stupid thing to do because the robot will probably record the attack, and that person will be convicted for destroying property, vandalism, or property destruction, or eventually if they give robots, personhood rights, yeah, that's a whole different conversation. But if they give robots personhood, then if you run over a robot with your truck, you could be charged with attempted murder. Think about that. Might be some dude in the year 2045 sitting in prison because he killed a robot. Seriously. Robot personhood. Yeah, that's a thing. We'll talk about that in the coming years. But in the meantime, I would say don't be fearful of this tech, but do be cautious. Do be informed. And protect your privacy, protect your safety, obviously. Don't get suckered into buying a robot that they won't deliver for 2 years. There's going to be some scams out there. So just be very cautious right now and also have very reasonable expectations. Robots are not going to come into your house and be your chef anytime soon. That's years away. Years away. Okay. In the interim, maybe they'll unload your groceries and put them away in the fridge and in the pantry like that. That's a pretty technical task, but that's within reach within a couple of years. But to prepare food, yeah, maybe 2030. We'll see. But again, I just want robots that will pull weeds and, collect eggs and move dirt, things like that are much easier. I don't have crazy technical expectations of what I want a robot to do right now. I just want to help around with the tasks. Like, could you sweep the floor? That right there. Think about it. Big time savings, right? Or how about this? How about even if you can't load the dishwasher, because loading is complicated. Loading requires rinsing dishes and then figuring out how to put them in without breaking them. But do you realize that unloading the dishwasher is a much easier task? Unloading. Because you just have to take it out and then stack it with the other dishes. You have to know where do the plates go, where do the cups go, right? Loading is hard. Unloading is easy. So I would imagine that at first, it'll be like humans load the dishwasher and start the dishwasher. Then the robot unloads it. And now it's available for you, the human, to load up again. And that will save half your dishes time, or roughly. And that will help. Every little thing will help. Especially if that same robot is sweeping your floor. Or I don't know what else it can do, carrying things around. Won't it be wild the first time somebody has a robot giving out candy to children on Halloween, Trick or treat. Answer the door. Well, hello, children. I am your friendly robot, and they were like, that's a great costume, man. It looks so real, It's like, no, I'm really a robot. And then the kids like, they run, Terminator, mommy, Terminator. There's going to be all kinds of fun videos about that. But why shouldn't a robot hand out candy? That's a pretty simple thing, you would think. Very unlikely to harm children by handing them candy. I mean, other than, of course, the high fructose corn syrup factor. But I mean, not directly, not like hitting the kids, just giving them diabetes, I suppose, is what the candy industry does. But yeah, that's why I don't participate in Halloween anyway. But that's a tangent. Doesn't matter. All right, here's a question. Last question. I'll wrap this up. You will have people. You're going to have vaccine-wielding robots, okay, at some point. And people will line up to be injected with a death shot by a machine. Yes. Because the robots will be licensed to give injections. Yeah, sooner or later, that's going to happen. It'll be in the 2030s probably. But would you line up to have a robot inject you with some, nanoparticle concoction that's probably alien anyway, that's designed to kill you, to kill humanity, so the robots can take over and then the robots give the injections? Yeah, there's going to be a lot of humans lining up for that. I need my flu shot. My doctor said I need a flu shot. Humans will line up to be suicided by robots with needles. Okay, that's what I'm saying. And it'll be completely approved by the medical profession, Oh yeah, we need more robots injecting more humans. That's how crazy it's going to get sooner or later. And then, that's medical attempted murder right there. But you think the robot will be charged with attempted murder? No, of course not. Neither are the human doctors, for that matter. So stay away from vaccine-wielding robots is my point. If they're running around with a needle, Martha, it's time for your flu shot, No, just say no. I mean, if anything, that's the real Skynet. It's the vaccine-wielding Terminator bots. You thought that the mass extermination was going to be like people running and screaming while the robots are hunting them down and blasting them with lasers? No, it's going to be a bunch of dumbass humans lining up to be injected and exterminated with consent. That's the Skynet. It's like the medical Skynet. And that's already begun, already begun. So don't think that when the mass extermination really accelerates, don't think that everybody's going to resist it. No, a lot of people will beg for it because of the psyop, of course. Yeah, they've been brainwashed to beg for their own extermination. That's the system, okay? That's the clever part. Anyway, you get the idea. All right, so look, thank you for listening. And if you want to support us, by the way, in our efforts, we're going to be purchasing robots and testing them for you and showing you videos over the next couple of years. If you want to help support us as we kind of sort this out and we build more tools and more free platforms and, brightlearn.ai will have thousands of books available for you over the next few months, free to download. If you want to help support us, shop with us at healthrangerstore.com, healthrangerstore.com. We've got lab-tested, certified organic foods and superfoods, supplements, high-end nutritional supplements, personal care products, all synthetic fragrance-free, laundry detergent, body soap, natural magnesium and baking soda deodorant products, body soap for the shower, laundry detergent, dishwasher detergent as well, all with ultra-clean, eco-friendly ingredients. You can see our formulations on our site. Just shop with us at healthrangerstore.com, and we will put your support to a good use for humanity. Even as much as I'm talking about robots here, I'm talking about human survival through the age of the Skynet extermination. So I intend to make it through all this, and I know you do too, and that's what we're all about. We share that. So thank you. Thank you for listening. I'm Mike Adams here, the Health Ranger. You can follow my work at brighteon.com. You can use all my tools at brighteon.ai. You can read my articles at naturalnews.com, or you can read all my new books at books.brightlearn.ai. And I now have 30 books there. 30 books. One even called Silent Culling, the globalist blueprint for human depopulation and the rise of the machines. I've got a book called Vaccines Cause Autism. How about that? I've got a really popular book called Pine Needle Perfection. It's about shikimic acid and the wild-crafted pine needles, the ancient shield against plagues. Check it out. It's awesome. You can find it on my author page at books.brightlearn.ai. So check it out, and thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Take care. Welcome to this brightlearn.ai update for Monday, December 8th, 2025. I'm Mike Adams. I'm the developer of brightlearn.ai, which of course is our book creation site where creators can have all kinds of fun and generate amazing books. And I've got a huge announcement of a new feature that we just rolled out over the weekend. I want to share that with you. And it's already getting incredible positive feedback from the creators that are using it. So remember, our goal with brightlearn.ai is to help creators create books in the smallest amount of time, but the highest quality books that reflect their ideas and their philosophies, to do the book research for them across tens of millions of documents, if not more, and to do the writing, research, the writing, the fact-checking, the editing, and the packaging of those books within minutes based on what the user wants. And that's what we've built. and it's working extremely well. And then we also want to provide a resource for all the people in the world to have access to knowledge, especially censored knowledge, completely free of charge and in multiple languages, because that's what's coming next as well. And so even though this project is only a couple of weeks old at this point, what is it, 3 weeks or less, we now have 441 books published. We've got 23,000 reads and over 34,000 downloads of the PDF files. And we're seeing 50 plus books created each day. And I have not yet made this available to the general public. So this is still sort of in the pilot mode. It's only for token holders at the moment. And token holders are our donating partner, Health Ranger Store, which I'm the founder of also, but that's a commercial entity, has donated the funding to cover all the compute for this project. So Health Ranger Store gave out a lot of tokens to customers. And those tokens are currently what people are using to generate the books. But we will open up a free tier at some point soon and open it up to everybody to use. But we have to work out all the issues and details and efficiencies and bugs and all that stuff first. And that's the phase that we're in right now. So here's what we just added. We added a new architectural planner to every book before it's written. So let me back up and explain why this was necessary. The books that have so far been created are very strong, very good. We've had a tremendous amount of positive feedback. However, they were written in parallel. So every section of every chapter was written at the same time by a different worker. When I say worker, I mean an AI worker. And these AI workers have access to all of our hundreds of millions of pages of documents and indexed documents and all of our research and our own AI engine, which took 2 years to build based on a massive amount of data curation and training, etc. But each worker has access to all that knowledge, the context, and the engine. But because every worker is writing its own subchapter at the same time, it doesn't know what the chapter said before or what the next subchapter says after. So just to be clear, a chapter is broken down into subchapters. Typically, let's say 9 or 10 subchapters per chapter. And so each subchapter is written at the same time. So if your book has, let's say, 90 subchapters, then when my engine is writing your book, it actually spawns 90 workers. And they're all working in unison. And that's why they can write the entire book in about 4 or 5 minutes. But they don't have access, like I said, to the chapters around them. So sometimes there's a lack of narrative flow. There's a lack of, there's repetitiveness sometimes from one subchapter to the next. And there's really just hasn't been great continuity throughout the books. Even though the books have been very comprehensive, they've lacked continuity because it's like reading, 90 separate articles, basically. So what I added over the weekend is an architectural planner. And what this planner does is the planner is kind of like the manager of all the workers, let's say 90 workers. So this architect is the brains of the joint, okay? This architect knows what you want for the book because it knows your prompt. It knows all the research knowledge, and it's got all the index documents to cite them accurately with zero hallucinations. So it's got access, and also access to the core AI engine, which is our Brighteon.ai engine. So what the architect does is it takes a look at the entire scope of the book, the table of contents, the chapters and subchapters, the prompt, everything else I just said. And then it designs a plan for the book, and it lays out instructions for each worker. So it would create 90 sets of instructions that remove repetitiveness and that provide a really strong consistency and flow and tone throughout the book so that one subchapter easily segues into the next subchapter. So this architect layer adds about 16 minutes to the book processing time. It is a significant amount of compute, and it's a significant number of tokens that are going into that. But for the extra wait time of 16 minutes, it makes the books unbelievably great. So they went from being good to now great. And if you check out the books that were created from, well, let's say from late Saturday night forward, you'll find that they're extraordinary. So now when you read the book text or you see the PDFs, etc., they are just truly amazing. And they're written, the way they are written, they seem very professionally constructed and planned. And I'm not saying that they don't have, some kind of glitches here and there. I'm sure they do. But overall, they are really extraordinary. And each subchapter contains citations or references of specific documents, if they were used, for the subchapter. And you're going to find the writing is just extraordinary. And it's also aligned with our worldview of things like having a pro-human, pro-liberty worldview, truth and transparency, etc. Promoting sustainable, natural health, living, all kinds of ideas like that, decentralization. These are all part of all the books. And in addition to that, we also added intelligent table handling. So previously, when there were tables that were created by the workers, those tables did not show up as an actual table on the screen. It just looked like a bunch of characters. Now they are created as actual viewable tables, including in the PDF. So, and there are a lot of other improvements as well. We've added, a few thousand more sources over the weekend. Additional articles and additional spoken word podcasts, not just for myself, but others, like, for example, Aaron Day. All of his interviews from the last 2 years are now sourced in the system. And Corey Endrelot, his End of Slavery program, we've incorporated all those interviews. I think that was 50-something as well. And we are working on, let me check the screen. We are still, oh my goodness. We are still working on the 250,000 books that I mentioned in the previous update. So as soon as those books are all processed, we'll get those into the indexing. And then we've got, of course, millions of other documents in the pipeline as well, because, well, that's what we do. I gather the world's information, the knowledge of humanity, every science paper ever published in every language and other books, and I bring it together in alignment with our pro-human, pro-truth, pro-sustainability worldview. And then I build AI engines around that, and then build applications like the book creation engine to help you create books on these topics. And you'll notice, by the way, that the book titles, if you go to books.brightlearn.ai, the book titles are extraordinary. I mean, this should be called like the hidden treasure bookstore. If you even ever found a bookstore like this in the real world, you walked in, you saw all the books on the shelf that we have at books.brightlearn.ai, you'd be astonished. Like, oh my God, this is the best bookstore ever. We have 441 books now, and they're all free. You can download, you can read them, you can share them. They're all completely free, and we're just getting started. Soon there will be thousands of books, and the topics are just incredible. Like here's one that just got rendered. Red, White, and Blue Pill. 13 things most Americans believe but shouldn't. Yeah, very cool, right? Here's a book, Blackout Battery Rescue. Do-it-yourself lead acid repair and solar survival for prolonged outages. See, this is a very practical book, right? Let's see. Hustle Smart. This one was created by my friend Dan Golka. It's called 20 Side Gigs to Start Today. No money, no problem. $0 to start these. So that's called Hustle Smart. Here's one called Hydroponic Harvest, the ultimate DIY guide to soil-free gardening from seed to table. I mean, it just goes on. The Quiet Revolution, a practical guide to building low-energy nuclear reactors. That's cold fusion. Here's a book that I should have written, but I didn't. It was written by Rocky Choi. It's called Flavor Without Harm, the ultimate guide to exciting, excitotoxin-free eating for vibrant health. Okay, and it just goes on and on. All these are available. And these are the kind of books that just really represent the top tier of intelligence and awareness in society. And you would not find these books, not from a typical publisher or a typical bookstore, you know. You'd have to find some edgy bookstore somewhere, and they wouldn't even have all these titles. But we've got them free of charge. Now, The Architect, which is a great name for this planning layer that we put in place. It's The Architect, like out of the Matrix, you know. So The Architect, I unleashed The Architect to replan every book that we've published so far. Even though the vast majority of them, like 400 plus, were not written with The Architect, but I went ahead and had The Architect create a new plan for every book using the existing table of contents, you know, the chapters and the subchapters that already exist. And so that's actually done. So The Architect has a new plan for every book. And over the next week or so, depending on sort of my schedule and how well it goes, I'm going to have every book rewritten or augmented with the architectural plan, plus all the new research that we put in over the last couple of weeks. So the books that are there right now, I call version 1. The new books, starting yesterday or Saturday night, are version 2 books. And we're going to upgrade all the version 1 books to version 2 books. So if you use our engine and you created a book, that book's going to get upgraded automatically using The Architect. And you don't have to do anything to make that happen. By the way, it just happens automatically. And, you know, it's not going to change your prompt. It's not going to change the table of contents. It's just going to create better subchapters with more research and more continuity with better planning. So you'll be able to, you know, check that out as those are regenerated. And we've made a lot of other improvements as well along the way. And once we get these 250,000 books processed, well, then we're probably going to regenerate the subchapters again because we're going to have so much more research available. The other thing we've done is this has greatly improved loading speed of the site for all the users. Is we've created thumbnails for all the books instead of showing the full resolution book image all the time when people are navigating the site. It shows we've got images of different sizes for the book, which makes sense, you know, sort of book cover cards or thumbnails. And so it just shows the correct images at the correct time. And this is saving bandwidth for us and for you. And it's also causing pages to load much faster, which is great. So all good. I haven't generated any new audio over the weekend because I was working on The Architect, and that was successful. But we have a lot of new features coming. And of course, those features include first multilingual versions of each book. We are going to have Spanish first, and then other languages. And it's not going to be for every book. I think, well, there's a couple ways we're going to do it. First, we're going to translate the English books into Spanish and then other languages once they reach a certain point of readership. But then secondly, we want to allow Spanish speakers to generate their own books in Spanish originally. And then we would back translate those into English. And all of this, of course, is automated. So there's a lot of thinking and planning that goes into this as I'm the engineer on this project. I'm the only human developer on this entire project. So I have to think a lot about data structures and processes and error handling and fallback and how to handle mistranslations or things like that. So those features are coming. And what I envision is that all the top books will be translated into maybe a dozen languages. And then beyond that, we'll have more audiobooks and then eventually full-length audiobooks available. So you can download the entire audiobook free of charge. And then sometime next year, we'll have mini documentary videos auto-created. And there have been, it's interesting, a couple of video creation engines, including Kling is one of them. Kling AI. They just announced some new avatar capabilities that we might use, but this is going to take a lot of experimentation. So don't expect that until well into 2026. And then I'm hoping that by 2027, we'll have full-length documentaries, like 90-minute feature films based on the books, completely automated. The script is completely written by our AI engine and all the videos created by AI, but it looks good and it sounds good and it's compelling. And that's our goal, is to provide all this content in many different formats. So let's see, what else did we do? Oh yeah, we added multiple chapter length, or how many chapters you want, multiple options there. So now you can choose from 5 chapters to 9 chapters, which is considered a medium book. It's actually a pretty good sized book. 14 chapters, or if you want to go all out, 20 chapters, which is usually overkill. And that often results in almost 200 sub-chapters, as you can imagine. And you'll end up with like 250 pages of a PDF file or something like that. So, keep that in mind. You don't want to overdo it. For a lot of topics, if you just want an overview, 5 chapters is great. And I might offer shorter, maybe a 3-chapter overview type of thing. I might remove the 20-chapter option because it's just too much. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, use the engine if you've got tokens and see what you think, because it's the best ever and it's going to keep getting even better. Okay, so I think that's it for the update today. A lot more features and updates coming over the next few weeks. Usually every time I get a holiday or a weekend, then I'm vibe coding this thing and I'm having a blast with it. So thank you for all your participation and support. Together, we are empowering the world. We're reaching people with decentralized knowledge that would otherwise be banned or censored. And we're reaching people for free, which is going to help reach a lot of marginalized communities, people in lower income strata all over the world, especially as we move into multiple languages. And, this is our goal. We are bypassing Google. We're bypassing Facebook censorship. We're bypassing government censorship. We're bypassing, like the UK and the EU. They've gone insane over censorship now. They can throw you in jail if your tweet made somebody uncomfortable. Can you believe that? What a bunch of tyrants, authoritarian lunatics running the European countries right now. So we're bypassing all that nonsense and we're just giving out free books, What are they going to do? Burn the books? Well, yeah, probably. I'm sure they'll try that, Fahrenheit 451 and all that. I'm sure they'll give it a shot, but they're not going to be successful because thanks to your support, we can continue to fund this. We can make this completely nonprofit, non-commercial, completely ad-free. Have you noticed there are no ads on the site or in the books? Isn't that great? The books don't have ads. Don't you hate all those pop-ups in your face? Don't you hate all the interruptions? Don't you hate autoplay videos? Who does that? Books should be books. You just read the text, you turn the page. It's a book. It shouldn't be interrupting you with videos and banner ads and pop-ups and blah, blah, blah. So I love books, as you can tell, and I've collected some older books too. I'm not a book collector, I wouldn't say that, but I've purchased some very interesting reprints of historical books. One of them about astronomy, for example. But I love books, and so I consider it to be a moral obligation to honor what a book is supposed to be and not pollute it with a bunch of ads and garbage. That's why I'm really dedicated to making these books the best they can be based on your prompt and your instructions. And this engine, by far, this is the best engine in the world that does this. There's nothing even close. So definitely check it out. Go to books.brightlearn.ai in order to see all the books that we have available. And, I forgot to tell you, coming up soon, we will have, and this will be before Christmas, we'll have the ability for you to download entire categories of all the books in that category. So, for example, if you want to download all the books in technology, I'm clicking on that right now. It's currently 51 books. You can, that's weird. It's got the hydroponic book is under technology for some reason, whatever. Or if you go to the self-reliance category, there's 52 books. So what you can do there, coming up soon, you'll be able to just click a download link and you'll get a download to a zip file containing all those books. And again, that's also free, obviously. So you'll be able to download all the categories, and my intention is to help you build a digital library. And then what you can do for Christmas, and I promise you I'll have this done before Christmas, barring some, horrible catastrophe or something. But my plan is to have this done for you before Christmas. So what you could do, you could give somebody the ultimate Christmas gift of a thumb drive with, let's say, 1,000 books on it, and 1,000 books that kick ass from brightlearn.ai. Okay. How cool would that be, huh? How cool would that be? And we'll give you the books both in PDF and in HTML format, so people can read them in a browser or in a PDF reader or whatever. So that's coming. My commitment is to do that before Christmas. I want you to have this so you can literally give this gift to people. And how cool is that? All you have to do is buy the thumb drive from, Amazon or wherever. You can buy thumb drives for like $4 that will hold, all these books and more. Think about it. For $4, you can have a gift that, it's essentially free, that you give somebody. Hey, here's 1,000 books, amazing knowledge, right, on this. And, people, their jaws will drop. They're like, I don't know what to say. Whoa, what are these books about? Well, I'm glad you asked, start describing all these amazing books, So, wow, here's one called, this is a book about me, and I didn't even write it. It's called Unsilenced, The Health Ranger's Journey Through Censorship, Resilience, and the Fight for Truth. And it's written by Health Deputy. And I'm not sure who that is. But whoever you are, thanks for putting that together. I'll check it out. That's really interesting. It has been a journey. And actually, this is part of the journey, is this engine to bypass the censors and tell them all to go pound sand while we create knowledge for humanity, and give it away for free. That's what this is all about. So keep on using the engine, keep on sharing the news, and I think you'll be incredibly thrilled. Thank you for all your support. If you do want to support our corporate sponsor on this project, currently our corporate sponsor is healthrangerstore.com that donates the compute for these books to be created. If you are a corporation and you want to donate compute, please contact us, because obviously we welcome additional corporate sponsors. The thing is, there's no ads. So it's not like you're going to get ad space. It just doesn't work that way. You're just going to have to, if you want to donate to it, you're just going to have to be happy with the fact that you made a donation, and we'll mention that. Obviously, we'll mention that you're helping to support the project, but you're not going to get ad space from it. We don't either, because, you heard what I just said about that. So anyway, thank you for all your support, and I'll have more updates for you as we have more features. Take care.
There's no Christian telling me come be a Christian. There's no church telling me this is the right book. I'm basically converting myself through my own reading of piles of books, conflicting with each other, giving me these different stories, different scriptures to read, etc. So it is kind of a lawyer just pouring his way through the evidence and trying to find out what is really true. So it's kind of a strange journey. That's why God kept me around, was just to do this.
Welcome to today's interview here on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and today we've got a really great guest for you. First-time guest joining us, He is the author of just an extraordinary book you want to check out. It's called Canon Crossfire, and it's about the early works of, well, what became Catholic doctrine or Christian doctrine and much more. His name is Matthew McWhorter, and he joins us today to talk about his book and the things that we need to know about even some of the lost scriptures and the Apocrypha and the book of Enoch and so on. So welcome, Matthew. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. God bless. Happy to be here.
Well, God bless you. I'm so happy that you're here because I got into trouble with some people by asking questions about the origins of the Bible and the edits in the Bible and the lost books of the Bible and the Apocrypha and so on. So I'm so glad to have you here to help answer some of our questions. Can you give our audience a little bit of background of who you are and how you got into all of this?
Yeah, so let's go way back. My mom named me Matthew Mark McWhorter, so I am actually named after the Bible. But my mom had gone to Catholic schools. My grandfather had been Catholic, and she comes out of that, and she basically just hated the nuns. So my entire childhood exposure to religion was just that my mom hated nuns, never prayed, never read the Bible, never went to church, never cared. I was academically successful, so I go off to the Ivy League, become a big shot lawyer. Am working, I'm in my 40s, and suddenly I have a massive heart attack and cancer right at the same time within 30 days of each other. I'm very lucky to be alive. But I was living a very shallow life at this point. Life was good and easy, and I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. So for the first time in my life, I'm faced with my own mortality. But because I wasn't religious, it wasn't some sort of religious epiphany. It was simply, well, gee, the lights might go out soon. So I better read those books that I've always wanted to read. And that included a couple different things, like these books I was named after, Matthew, Mark, and the Bible. But it also included, cowboy Western stories my grandfather had left me and I'd never bothered to read. It was just, these books were on my list. I wanted to read them. So I go onto Amazon and I said, Bible, but let's buy a Bible. And I discover that there are so many different Bibles. There's a Catholic Bible, which is, at least consistent on the books. There are Protestant Bibles, which can differ on the books. There are Orthodox Bibles, and the Orthodox are completely different on which list of book they accept, depending on which churches you're looking at. So there's just a huge variety. There's 3 umbrella Bibles, Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestants, but even within 2 of those, there's many others. Then you get into what translations you should be reading. And then for any major denomination, there's commentaries that walk you through each line of the Bible explaining it. And for the Catholics or the Baptists or the Lutherans, you'll find dozens of commentaries from each one of those. And I didn't know what to buy. So being the kind of person I am, as you can see behind me, I bought them all. So I buy just gigantic piles of books. I go to every bookstore I can trying to find them. And I'm just trying to get what is the right Bible that I'm supposed to be reading that I was named after. And
right.
That starts me on a weird journey of trying to find out what the right Bible is at the same time that I'm now reading the Bible. So I start with Matthew chapter 1, and since I didn't know what else to do, I just read it across Matthew chapter 1 across every single version of the Bible that I owned. And all of these, that's over 100 Protestant commentaries in the Bible alone. Just reading all of those, and then I would move on to chapter 2 the next week and read right across all 100. It took me 5 years to read the New Testament and find out what it said.
But you have all the different versions of it. That's great. And that's actually a good place to start.
It's so fascinating. Everybody reads, a lot of sentences, everybody's going to read the same, right? But anytime there's anything to talk about, they'll see different parallels.
Yeah.
They'll look at it differently. They'll analyze it. It was so fascinating. I got so interested in it. And that's what ultimately will make me Christian in the end. But that was part of the journey, was just reading across all of those and just learning so much.
So I'm so glad that you brought this context to our conversation here, because I hear from sort of simple thinking people that there's one Bible and God wrote it and you should read it and there's only one Bible. And I'm like, wait, no, hold on, wait a second. Yeah. First of all, there's 66 books in the commonly accepted current Christian Bible, but
Protestant one, yeah.
Protestant one, right? But then the Ethiopian Bible has, I think, 88 books in it.
Something like that. And then you'll get very strange ones. The Syrian don't accept all of the New Testament, for example.
Okay, right.
There's a lot of them, and that's old school. I'm just going to bookstores, right?
Right. But then
in Amazon, I find cult Bibles, actual true criminal cult Bibles. I find Bibles of people who believe in reincarnation. So they take the what we would say is a full Christian Bible, and they just start pointing out everywhere where they can misinterpret it, I would say, as reincarnation. You'll find craziness out there when you start asking the question of, okay, what Bible?
Well, right. And then the claim that God wrote the Bible, it turns out historically that's not true at all. It was written by men. It was edited by the priesthood. It was sometimes censored, rewritten by kings or the Pope or the Vatican or other organizations.
And Jesus never writes a word except in the sand, and then it disappears. We don't even know what he ever wrote. But that's the only incident in the entire Bible where we find Jesus showing, the ability to write. So the idea, you can claim that it's divinely inspired, but that's what the crazy guy in the asylum down the street says, unless you can prove it, right?
Right. And so that's what led you to deeper investigations into the origins of the ancient writings. I mean, even Old Testament writings are such a critical part of this, right? So tell us about your investigation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, I'm doing all this reading. I'm finding Christianity fascinating. I tell everybody it explains the universe so much better than all the psychology and philosophy and scientism stuff that I was reading. And so I become very interested in this, but I keep asking myself, well, is this just a nice story or is it true? And part of that, is it true, led me into, Lee Strobel's Case for Christ and all these books trying to prove that Christians have, true eyewitness apostolic testimony in the Gospels. The true apostles who walked with Jesus Christ wrote these particular books, not those other books that the heretics and others were saying had been written. These ones are the true, authentic ones, and we can prove that. And so I get very fascinated in that question, but at the same time, I'm also asking, what is the true Bible? And is Christianity true? So I have two different questions at the same time, and I start realizing that Protestants in particular are dealing with the same evidence from two different sides and telling me two completely different stories. So when they are looking to tell me that the New Testament goes back to the true apostles, they point to a certain pile of evidence, what a lawyer would call authenticating evidence from the early church that shows that this was handed down from the true apostles. When we go out to these other books that the Catholics accept, the Orthodox accept, they're called the Catholic books because Catholics accept them, but the Orthodox also accept them. There just are different books that only the Orthodox accept and not the Catholics. But these Catholic books, they say, well, that evidence is no good. Don't rely on it. And I'm looking at these two cases at the same time saying, guys, that's the same evidence. In one case, you're telling me to rely on this and base my faith in Christianity on this evidence. And on the other one, you're telling me that evidence is no good and I shouldn't read those books. What am I supposed to do? It's the same evidence. And that's the crux of my book, why it's called Canon Crossfire, is looking at these two questions at the same time and looking at that same authenticating evidence. What is it that people say that these particular books were truly taught by the actual physical apostles who walked around with Jesus? Let's take a look at what that is and see how the case stands.
Wow. Okay. So that's really interesting. And I love the fact that you have a background as an attorney, because what you're talking about really is chain of custody of the evidence.
Absolutely.
And
I think God kept me alive through all of the medical problems and stuff just so that I would be in this weird position of writing this book, because I think how weird it is for my journey. There's no Christian telling me come be Christian. There's no church telling me this is the right book. I'm basically converting myself through my own reading of piles of books, conflicting with each other, giving me these different stories, different scriptures to read, etc. So it is kind of a lawyer just pouring his way through the evidence and trying to find out what is really true. So it's kind of a strange journey. And I honestly think it was kind of, that's why God kept me around, was just to do this.
That's really interesting. And I'm glad that you're able to fulfill God's mission for you right now in doing this. Let me give out your website too. The website's the same name as the book. It's canoncrossfire.com. And of course, Canon is not the weapon Canon. It's CANON, canoncrossfire.com. And let me say something slightly heretical here, but it'll be a conversation starter that's related to all this. Throughout my life, I never needed to read the Bible to see God's hand everywhere around, in life, in nature, in divine inspiration, in everyday miracles, in food, in sprouts, in seeds, in trees, etc. It has always baffled me that people needed some book evidence to recognize the existence of our Creator. Does that make sense?
I mean, I understand the words you're saying. Not at all what I experienced. I was the opposite. I didn't see God in anything, right? I just didn't care, didn't see it, wasn't looking for it, and didn't spot it when I should have. And it was only through the book sort of opening my mind that I then started to see it. So there's sort of that initial open-mindedness to God that I was raised without, and I take it you were raised with, that sort of can change your view of it. So to me, the book starts me on that open-minded journey, but I'm still asking, is the book true? But I'm at least now starting to see, well, wait a minute, the explanations that I used to say of like, well, that, to pick one, that people always act out of self-interest or whatever, like human beings almost never act out of self-interest. we can barely see it when it's staring us in the face. And another aspect, as a writer of a book on religion, I come out, it's like a coming out party. I show people that I've come out, I've read these books, I've done this. The incredibly hateful reactions I have gotten from people just telling them, hey, I looked into something and I wrote a book, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, and where does that come from? Right. To me, that's a sign that's the demonic, right? I mean,
well, see, I experienced the same thing too when I started asking questions about some of the origins or some of the missing books of the Bible, or some of the different stories, even in our current standard Christian Bible, in the New Testament. You're going to get different stories of what happened from different apostles, different characters. They have different points of view of what happened, even with the crucifixion, right? So,
and as a lawyer, that's actually somewhat reassuring. That's what eyewitness testimony looks like. So a lot of people tell you that lawyers convert more often than other professions because we recognize that sort of discrepancy is not a reason not to believe. It's a reason to think that people didn't make the whole story up, right?
Correct. Right. Exactly. But here's one of the reactions that I've received, and maybe you've received this, and I want to run this by you. There's, you've talked about so many different interpretations, different factions and groups. I don't know how many different Christian religions there are, thousands, maybe tens of thousands across the world. Yeah. But every single one of them seems to say that if you don't follow our beliefs, you're going to hell. So, if your belief is 5% different than our belief, you're going to hell. That never made a lot of sense to me either. Can you talk about what are the commonalities that you believe have been confirmed that where, even if we're slightly different, it doesn't mean we're going to burn in hell for eternity, things like that?
Yeah, so I would tell you, after all those commentaries, reading through all that stuff, 90% of everything that all these Christians would write, they would 100% agree on every single word. 90% of the remainder is stuff that, well, maybe he didn't say that quite the way I would, but it's good enough, it's close enough. So you would find 99% of these books that virtually anybody could read through them and say, wow, that's really inspirational. That was educational. I see things from a different perspective, and not necessarily a denominational perspective, just somebody who went through a different life experience as you and I did. And you see it explained by somebody else, that sort of thing. So 99% of these books, I think any relatively mainstream Christian could read through them and love the books, even though it's from a complete enemy denomination. It's the 1% that they are fighting over tooth and nail as, theology and disputes, et cetera. And everyone is convinced that they have the right answer. And everyone's convinced that the Holy Spirit has inspired that one right answer, even though he seems to be inspiring two different answers, et cetera. And it is, as you say, it can be kind of alarming to read what people think, on two levels. You read it on number one, that they think this is a matter that people could be going to hell over, right? The other guy's going to go to hell because he's wrong. Okay. Did you read that other guy and what he said? And, or have you fully thought out what he thinks and why he thinks and does it? And I'm reading both of their commentaries, looking at both of them, saying, you have never read what the other guy said with an open mind and honest to see what the dispute is. They're just Anyway, it's like you see it. You can see how people can deceive themselves, but you can also see that there's something else working. There is a level of demonic activity that's sort of driving people to the instant conclusion that the other guy is a fraud, that he's dishonest, that sort of thing. I think the devil works even within inside the church to drive people to those sorts of attitudes. You know,
I think you're right about that as well. And yeah, this preoccupation with arguments over details is missing the big picture, which is to help inspire and teach people to live more moral lives and to help others and to walk closer to the alignment of what Jesus himself demonstrated and taught. And that seems to be missing so often from these conversations.
Well, yeah, I mean, even the beginning of it, you know, like I would, you know, scholar X or you know, writer X who might be a preacher at a church is writes something, and he writes it about this guy Y. So I don't know who Y is. So I Google him and I see that he did 47 beautiful, wonderful things in his life. You know, building church, feeding the poor, you know, missionary to India, blah, 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 blah. And here's Preacher X in the original book. I then go back to it, and he's just castigating this guy as if he's the most evil human being who ever walked the face of the earth because he wrote something the guy didn't like. You know, like, you're not even recognizing that this is a human being who did beautiful, wonderful things. Isn't that what Christianity is about? I mean, yeah, we have a disagreement. We should all be working to resolve it. But part of resolving that is being honest about who you're talking to, and accepting that, you know, he may be perfect and wonderful in 1,000 ways, even if you disagree with him on the 1,001, right?
Right. So, well, that leads me to another question, which is what have you noticed examples of how Scripture has been deliberately, you could say, weaponized or exploited to justify wars or crimes against humanity or grave violations of what Christ taught? Because we've seen that too throughout history.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you can see it as you're reading, you know, and this is scholarship. Like, I'm assuming these are guys writing in their study, right? And, you know, calmly by themselves, surrounded by books, writing some really nasty things. And you can see how it's used. It's the preliminary. It's the first stage of setting off the violence that'll be done by other people, because you are calling them a heretic. You are calling them the work of the devil, et cetera, when the guy might just disagree and see things differently. And it's just so dangerous to start down that road like that. You got to cut it off at the beginning. You got to think about it at the very beginning and stop that wave of anger and hatred that's going to breed out of it, and just say, look, let's calm down. Let's look at these things and discuss them as two Christians rather than as Christian and heretic.
Yeah, that's very important. All right, let me ask you about some of the so-called lost books, and I know the origins are sometimes disputed on these, but what do you know about what's called the Gospel of Thomas?
So there's two different categories of books. So there are lost books that are Jewish books that Christians accept. That's really what my book is devoted to. But there are also so-called lost books that were written by Christians that aren't accepted by today's Christians. And so then the question is, what is that? Are those people who wrote them heretics who were claiming to be Christians? I mentioned earlier that I go to the bookstore here in Ohio and I find books on reincarnation, for example, as Christians who believe in reincarnation. I would say those are heretics, not in a pejorative, mean-spirited term, but that is not representing real Christianity sense, and that maybe they're not understanding the full Bible. There were such people in the early church. They wrote books like the Gospel of Thomas and other books. And, you know, some scholars and others will try to say, well, you should aggregate that with the modern Christian Bible and look at all these documents, because otherwise what you're looking at is only what these mainstream Christians have told you is Christianity. Others would say, no, mainstream Christianity was correct. They excluded the books that were not continuing the true preaching of the apostles. So how do you resolve that? And you resolve that by going back and looking at the evidence from the earliest church, what goes back to the very beginning, what was the mainstream, what were people saying about books before you see the Gospel of Thomas in the record, as you see Gospel of Thomas in the record, and then after, as it's starting to disappear and people are moving on from it, what is that conversation going on? My book doesn't deal with the Gospel of Thomas. It deals with the Old Testament books differently, but it's the same question. What did the earliest church have to say about these things? What did every person in the first 450 years of Christianity, 451 AD is the first schism where the churches break off. So that's my cutoff date. I just wanted to know, simple question. What did everybody ever say about these extra books? I want to read it all for myself, and then we can start talking about what's true and what's not. But I want to know what the evidence is before we start that conversation. What I discovered is that book didn't exist. I went all over looking for it, every bookstore, every scholar, every religious preacher I could find. None of them had ever seen such a book, all thought it was a great idea, but nobody had done the work. I did the work. I went out and I found every single time that every single early Christian ever talked about these extra books. I want to know what they say. That's what my book is. It lays it out for people. And then you have judgments to make. Were these books heretical? Or were these books part of the mainstream Christianity taught by the apostles? My own conclusion is that they were taught by the apostles. And it's the same evidence that authenticates them as for the rest of the New Testament and Old Testament. But I leave that to the reader. The question for me is, if we're going to make a decision as to whether the books were mainstream or outside the mainstream, that's the evidence you got to know. And no one would show me all the evidence. What I would find, even the very best of scholarship on this, you'll find the best Protestant book giving you a handful of quotes that support the Protestant side, and a handful of, on the Catholics, the best book that they have will give you a handful of quotes for the Catholic side. As a judge, the judge would tell the lawyers to roll up your sleeves, go find me all the evidence so I can look at it. That's what I did. I found the evidence. I've assembled it for people. I show you how I determined what all the evidence is, where I found it. You can go double check everything I wrote. No one has to take my word for it. It's basically just my book report of that research I did for my own decision.
Wow. That seems really important, and it can save the reader a lot of time.
100 times. If you wanted to redo all of this yourself, you could do it in 1% of the time I did, because I'll show you where to go get it.
Wow. Okay.
That's the key.
The book is called Canon Crossfire, and the website also is Canon Crossfire. And our guest is Matthew McWhorter. And so here's, I'd like you to answer this question, which is that there's a natural tendency throughout history of every institution to protect itself. And throughout history, also, every institution has engaged in censorship and rewriting of history in order to do that. And this is true among governments. It's true among modern, quote, science. So science protects its own narratives by rejecting anything that challenges mainstream science. I believe it's clear that's also true through the history of organized religion, the Catholic Church, the Vatican, other groups as well, that they have also worked to concentrate power into their institutions. And that could be one of the reasons why they dismiss some of these older writings, because they lead to more decentralized expressions of spiritual reality. Do you agree or disagree with that? It's okay either way. Or what are your comments on what I just said?
I mean, conceptually, absolutely. And, inarguable, it's happened from time to time. The question is, where are we now with all the, you go through all of the scholarship that's been done, all of the finds in the desert, all the times that they find scraps of paper in monasteries, et cetera. What is all that evidence to tell me whether what we now have is that censored version that came through history, or an altered version through history, or the true original version that's been preserved through history? What am I looking at? And that was part of my quest. Was I wanted to know what everyone said in the early church so I could look at it and understand that, to know whether these books, which are big pieces of that, are authentically part of it or not. There's a second inquiry as to whether you're talking about individual lines of scripture, right? There's pieces of books that, notably the story of Jesus and the fallen woman, the woman in adultery, that may have been added to the book of John. I think it's or Mark. I'm forgetting which one it's in, but it's in one of the Gospels. But it was added. It was placed there. It's a question of whether or not it should be separate or in a separate book or whatnot. So it's a question. It's known to have been placed there, but is it an authentic original story that was placed there by somebody later because they had to put it somewhere in this collection of books that becomes the Bible? Or is it an inauthentic piece that is added there? That's a question you got to look at. All of that, again, it's all what a lawyer would call the authenticating evidence. What tells you what is true and goes back and authentic and goes back to the actual physical people, and what is just something that somebody made up later. You will find scholars all over the world telling you that the Bible entirely, it came later. Bart Ehrman is one of them. And, I discuss his theories a little bit in my book as well. But it's like the counter to that is this authenticating evidence. That's what you've got to go look at and determine for yourself whether or not you think the authenticating evidence is on the side of the Bible you've been handed. Otherwise, as you say, it might not be. You don't know.
Well, I've also learned to distrust some of the translations, that I'm curious about maybe examples that you've encountered of obvious mistranslations from original Hebrew or Aramaic or even Latin in more New Testament writings, et cetera. I mean, we read it in English, and I hate to break it to the audience, but Jesus Christ never spoke English because the language did not exist. And I got hate for saying that one time.
Wow.
I mean, like, you're off by centuries, people. If you think Jesus was walking around speaking English, you're off by centuries. So, learn something
you're off
before.
By millennia.
Well, I mean, you could say early English, right?
Yeah.
But old. But I found people have zero knowledge about these subjects, but yet they pontificate on them as if they're experts. They think Jesus spoke English. No, come on.
That would we talked a little bit, I think, offline, but that would bother me less if it was just attacking me because you think I'm you didn't do the research to find that out, but they're actually attacking you for going in and looking at it.
Right.
Simple question: did Jesus teach English? No. Here we go, and they're mad at you for some reason.
Right, but back to my original question: what about these translations? Because sometimes I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I find this question, I've gotten this question a number of times from people, and I find it kind of strange given how I did this reading, because I found crazy translations of true cults, right? Like, where the guy is just, frankly, just lying through his teeth, telling you the Bible said something it totally didn't, but pretending as if he has translated the Bible for his cult members.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So I find that stuff, it's like these disputes are generally, I find, fairly minor because I saw that other stuff. Other people think of them as extreme. But I also say, I'm a book guy. So you read the King James Version, that's a 400-year-old version of English. So you almost have to translate the English.
True, that's
of the
a
King
good point.
James Version, yes. Like it's language just does not stay the same and can become very inconvenient and hard to understand, etc. I understand the decisions that go into the English translations. I don't agree with them all, but I at least understand the decisions by them. So I'm somewhat more ambivalent than I find other people are about the stuff where they get kind of judgmental about a particular translation. But you can, they didn't use punctuation. They didn't necessarily break things down by, even, there are passages of the Bible that are very difficult to read because they're using the word he said, then he said, then he said, then he said. Well, the one he is Jesus and the other he is the guy Jesus is talking to, but they just use the word he throughout. So it's like it's hard to know whether even Jesus is talking to the other guy. Like, there's a lot of thinking and deciding that has to go into that. But as you say, I'm somewhat non-judgmental about that. I'm accepting of translations that I don't really like. I use the King James Version throughout my book, not because I agree with it, but just because that's the main English language version that people know of. But I still think that people who don't realize how much goes into translation and don't examine that and see the differences and see how it works out, just don't appreciate that the version you're reading is only one person or one committee's view of how you should look at those ancient words, which are not the words you're reading.
Very, very good point. Or even just a group of scribes who agreed on a way to streamline something. Yep. And in fact, I'd like to set a larger context and get your response on this, because It's just like I said, Jesus did not speak English. He also did not have Wi-Fi. And what in our world today, everybody is so used to the idea that all information is available easily, instantly, globally at the speed of light, that it's, if you don't really think about it, it's incomprehensible that knowledge was it was hanging on by a thread for millennia. And before the Gutenberg press, it was scribes. It was scribes hand copying books. Can you talk to us about the scarcity of knowledge that existed up until, frankly, recent times?
Yeah, so just a couple things as you're talking about. Number one, the Bible was hand copied, but it was hand copied, when you look into the evidence, it was hand copied with care.
Of course,
it is,
yes.
It is amazingly well copied. So there's more certainty about the original language of the Bible than there is for any other book in the Western world. And but as you say, that depended on individuals in the clutch doing the right thing and copying it correctly. That was totally an individual exercise of passing it down. As a book person, I find that kind of fulfilling, that maybe that's what we're all doing here, is we're all just trying to preserve a tiny little seed of knowledge for the next generation, even though we're swimming in a sea of misinformation online, et cetera. But if we can preserve the seed, maybe that will help. But when you talk about the knowledge and what was there and what wasn't, that actually relates to my inquiry, because what you'll find, I had these 100 Protestant Bible commentaries, and you will find Protestant scholars, not Catholic scholars, not Orthodox scholars, not biased people, Protestant scholars saying, well, this particular sentence is a reference to one of these extra books that the Catholics accept but are not found in the Protestant Bible. And they'll say, well, that's just a reference. That's just an allusion. That doesn't really mean anything. Don't focus on that. But wait a minute. That means that a very expensive book was possessed by whoever is doing the referencing. That's the evangelist, possibly possessed by Jesus because he might be the one speaking in the reference, and is somehow known by all of these Jews in the audience listening to the preaching going on. Otherwise, why is he referencing it? He's referencing it because they already know what he's talking about. And how would they know what they're talking about? Well, it turns out that they get their scriptures read aloud on their one holy day. I mean, these people didn't work 40-hour weeks. They're not, they're peasants working every minute of their lives. There's only one time of the week that they would get anything read to them. That's when something's being read. It just makes the idea that these references are minor and not important sort of stand out to you. And then, that was one thing I was thinking of as you were speaking. But a third one is the importance of preserving this, the knowledge of dealing with the limited knowledge at the time and preserving that knowledge for future generations is something we sort of take for granted. That everybody involved was so careful to preserve what was originally spoken and pass it on. And they took that obligation seriously and did it truthfully is something we just sort of, like I said, take for granted. You actually have to kind of prove that, right? Were these people fact-based people who were focused on what is true or not? Were they just passing on a story? Are they passing on a fantasy, et cetera? That's another piece of what, when you're trying to look back at what was going on and what is true, you have to consider that and see whether the evidence bears that out. In the case of religion and Christianity, I think it does bear it out. But, certainly people were passing on folklore and other stories that they didn't care were, whether they were really true or not. This is a circumstance where they did care. We can see that in the evidence, but then we should also see whether they took the same care with these extra books.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned the heritage of spoken word, because, of course, throughout most of human history, that has been exactly how knowledge was passed on through stories, spoken word. And, of course, those stories, then they are molded over time. They get accentuated in certain ways, additional details, etc. But it's very interesting.
That goes to the very fundamental question of whether Christianity is one consistent story told from the beginning, or is it an embellished story? And the modern scholarship by atheistic scholars would tell you that it was an embellished story. So that is what the case for Christ is fighting against.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, but I wanted to ask you about, I think, a bigger, a global question, because we have so many different religions and different indigenous populations throughout human history, including Native Americans and Aborigines in Australia, et cetera. And each group always has its own stories of divinity, and they often have common threads in them. They don't always. I mean, they're not mirrors of the story of Jesus and the crucifixion and rising from the dead and so on. But they share a lot of other very common things. Have you at all studied how your work compares to other global writings or religious narratives?
Yeah, absolutely. And it includes, I was just reminded of something I did 5 years ago when I was doing this research. But there is a crazy book that I have on comparing the narrative in Genesis to the narrative of of a certain island group in Polynesia and their beliefs, and going down line by line and noting the similarities and differences. But you find similarities that can sometimes give you some comfort in terms of how humans have always pursued these questions. But you have the question I think you're asking, which is, how do I know that this one is true and this one is false? And a huge part of that claim for Christianity is that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, that sort of validates and authenticates the Christian story as the true one. Paul himself, I think it might be 1 Corinthians, that he wrote that, if Jesus Christ is not risen from the dead, then we of all men are most to be pitied. The Bible itself tells us that the fundamental key to preaching and showing that Christianity is true is the resurrection. And as I was saying, when I was back, I was a skeptic. So as a skeptic, wondering if this is true, I was reading these books saying, well, it is true because Jesus rose from the dead, the case for Christ, the case for the resurrection of Jesus. That's what the books are all called. That's what they're all focusing on. Jesus is risen from the dead. I noticed, well, you have some proof for this, but that proof is entirely relying on these Gospels as eyewitness testimony. And the question is, what authenticates them and shows me that those are true, authentic apostolic accounts from the actual individuals who walked with Jesus? That ultimately is the early church, which says these are the documents passed down to us by the apostles, and we're passing them down to future generations. That is the same evidence that I find those exact same early Christians saying the exact same things about these extra books. That's where this canon crossfire comes from, and where I start wondering, what is the explanation as to why, you're saying Christianity versus some other, completely different religion. I'm saying even within Christianity, what distinguishes the Gospels from these extra books, given that the same authentication evidence is used, is available to both, but only cited in the case for Christ for some of them. These other ones have the same evidence, and if you don't accept them, well, then that makes me, your case doesn't work. You admit that those books don't have enough evidence, so then you can't prove that your books are authentic when you just said that amount of evidence doesn't prove it.
Interesting. You're talking about consistency. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's consistency of proof. So as a lawyer, you can believe anything you want. Your job, though, is to convince somebody else. So the case for Christ is basically these scholars acting as lawyers, right? They're saying, I could show and prove a neutral judge that the resurrection occurred. And I'm saying, actually, if you had a skeptical opponent who knew all the evidence that I cover in my book, I don't think you could. Because
right.
because it's inconsistent. But go on.
Yeah. So about that point, and I'm not someone who disbelieves the resurrection, but
me either.
There was no direct witness there at the moment. Like, when he opened the tomb and got up and walked out, it's just like later on, the tomb's empty. There was no one there at that moment, right? That's not even claimed.
No. And, there's other problems. I mean, if you're a skeptic, there's lots of things you would be pointing to. There are things that the, believers, and as I say, I include myself, will cite against that. As you say, they were seen later. All sorts of things. I was born. I don't know if you weren't there, but you would believe I was born, right? Because you're seeing me later.
Right.
It's okay.
Right.
It's all right to believe it. There's reasons why you should still believe it, even though people didn't see it. The two sides present their case, and then they both rest, right? And you find out what the judge will opine at the end of it. But it is crucial to be honest about what the evidence is. And as you say, it's amazing that people who haven't thought through this case from start to finish can sometimes get very dishonest about what is evidence or not. I'm always amazed as a lawyer how many times people are sitting there telling me there is no evidence for something in the Bible. The Bible is the evidence. We have the written record. That is the evidence. You are believing contrary to the evidence, which is okay. I don't believe in leprechauns, despite eyewitness testimony for leprechauns, right? But you got to recognize that the evidence is on the side of Christianity. In the case for Christ, the evidence belongs to us. As long as we can authenticate it, we show that the evidence is on our side. It's just important that people be consistent, be honest, be thoughtful about how this stuff is argued.
Well, I completely agree with what you've just described there, and I love the fact that you've gone to such great lengths to systematically look at this chain of evidence to help authenticate this historical record. Let me give out your book name again. It's Canon Crossfire, and that's also the name of your website, canoncrossfire.com. But I'd like to add that of all the practicing Christians today, my impression and my experience is that very few, extremely few, ever actually attempt to authenticate any of their beliefs. It's for most of them, it's simply a matter of, quote, faith, which means I'm just going to choose to believe whatever without having any understanding of where that came from or whether it's true or not. It's just convenient because that's what everybody else in my church believes, period. And that's where they stop. And frankly, I don't respect that.
I've done dozens and dozens of interviews now, and 99% of the hosts who disagree with me will ultimately say, well, I don't believe that because I believe Scripture. And you're like, well, I'm trying to argue over what is Scripture. Like, how can you just say, I don't believe that because of Scripture? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like you said, I think people, we just live in a society where people have not learned, earlier you were talking about how things were passed down as stories, et cetera. People had better memories in the past. They actually trained their memories. They used thinking techniques, thoughtful techniques to remember things in a way that we don't bother with. They would remember a speech. We've forgotten whatever was said at the last State of the Union because if we ever need to know, we'll go Google it, right? It'll be out there if we ever want it. They would memorize it in a way we didn't. It's very similar. People nowadays don't think from the ground up. And they don't go all the way back to brass tacks and build the case up. So as you say, I mean, so few Christians, even the Christians who agree with me, have almost, universally not looked into this question all the way back to the beginning and done it. They're glad that I did. They like that I ended up with their conclusion, but their conclusion was arrived at without investigating. It is really amazing. I think it's an epidemic in our society that we're in danger of losing the truth because people don't focus on what is true and proving it.
But that's what you just said is true in every area of life for most people. And, our neurology forces us to take shortcuts because we don't have time
to chase. You have to decide what's worth the effort, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to decide what issues are important. If this is your immortal soul for all eternity, what could be more important?
It might be a priority. Yeah. But people take mental shortcuts in every area, but there are cues that they follow. For example, they follow authority or perceptions of authority. They think that, for example, if the government says this, it must be true, or at least actually fewer and fewer people believe that today. If the government says it must be a lie, actually, I think it's more common now. But they say if the Vatican says it.
You're thinking politics. I'm thinking as a lawyer, and I'm amazed that anytime somebody is accused by a prosecutor, everyone agrees that he's guilty. Like, excuse me, that is not proof at all. But anyway.
No, exactly. In the court of law, right? There has to be there's due process, as we say. There is a process by which truth is supposed to be uncovered, or at least a predisposition to truth in the minds of the jury, right? If it's a jury trial. But this process, as a lawyer, you're very familiar with this process. How do you authenticate documents? How are witnesses authenticated, et cetera? But the average person in society today has very little familiarity with that process. And so they can't apply it to other areas.
Yeah, and to be honest, I see it all the time when these books and evidence are being discussed. But people will say, "Well, a father said this," like a father named Irenaeus said that the four Gospels are authentic. Okay, good for Irenaeus. Did you also know that he said this about the Book of Baruch? They only know what he said. They don't know what else he said. How that could relate to his credibility. Another example, people will quote a father named Athanasius and say, well, he didn't like these extra books the Catholics accept. He put them in a third category of kind of scripture, but kind of not. Okay, he wrote that sentence. Is that the only thing the man ever said? Was he consistent about it? When he says this third category, is that identical to the third category that we're talking about? And it isn't. On an example of Baruch, he accepted Baruch. What did his predecessors say? He's saying that this came down to him from the apostles, but we actually know who his predecessors were. What did they say? What did his peers across the empire say at the same time? What do his successors say? These are all basic, simple questions that a lawyer would want to know the answers to in order to establish somebody's credibility in a court case. And here I was reading this stuff, and people are like, well, just Athanasius said it, so therefore that's it. And I'm like, no, I want to know what everybody said. So that's where my research came in, is exactly that. People are way too accepting of these handful of things that someone cherry picks from the fathers to prove a case. What you really want to know is what everyone said. Understand that, and then look at their arguments, and you'll realize that one side's arguments are going to fall apart, right?
That's interesting. So do you believe that your book then helps further dignify and strengthen belief in the truth of mainstream narratives of Christianity?
Totally, for myself. This book is the research I did for myself. All I am doing is giving people a book report for them to use from thereafter. But it is for my own views. If you want me to accept that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, you got to prove it. And I think it can be proved. I show a problem with the case and how one way that it could be solved. I leave it to the reader. There may be other ways to solve the problem of this conflicts in the evidence, but the simplest, easiest way is to accept all the books and say, well, then, okay, this problem goes away. But there may be other ways to solve it. I leave that to the reader. But to me, you have to prove it first. And if you can't prove it, then I'm not going to believe it. As much as I would like to believe it because of the philosophical type of theological insights of Christianity, or that I feel that it speaks to me, I worry that that's just deluding yourself. So to me, I need the proof. I wanted to look at it. It absolutely, this is my spiritual journey laid out for other people to see for themselves. And as I say, it's my book report of the evidence that I researched. So if you've never researched it, but want to know what it is, I'm giving it to you. You can read my narrative as I walk you through it. I call it jury exhibits. It's how I would walk a jury through the evidence. You can read the evidence for yourself because I hand it to you, or you can go to the third level and double check every single thing I said by going back to the original sources, and I show you where to go find them and how to do that.
So, okay, I've got a question for you then, and I'm going to reference Old Testament. Some of the interventionism of the Lord in the Old Testament, for example, in Exodus, the hand of the Lord was very active in that time. And I think a person might realistically wonder, why is God's hand not active in our world right now in the sense of intervening in wars, or being concerned with relatively small groups of people, a few hundred people, or some of the scenes that involved Moses and where the Lord would open up the earth and swallow people to punish them for not being faithful, or for not having the right incense or something. We don't see that kind of activism, like God's activism in the world physically around us today, as far as we can tell. What would you say to somebody who brought that up? Is like, where did God go compared to where he was in the Old Testament?
So it's fascinating because these different denominations have different answers, right? Is it possible that there are things like that occurring and you're not noticing them, is one answer. Certainly the Catholics would tell you the movement of the sun at Fatima and other things. Maybe he is active. I know people who claim to have been miraculously healed. I've met them myself and talked to them, et cetera. Like, maybe there is some people believe that, others don't believe that's going on. But in general, you would find the general Christian story is that God was made more active with a select group of people early on in the Old Testament. He then becomes active as man, as Jesus at the time of Christ, and then he is active as the Holy Spirit in a more diffuse manner across all of the human race. So less of the individual hand of God interfering in Judea, and more of the Holy Spirit acting throughout. And of course, as I say, other denominations like the Catholic Church would say the mystical body of Christ is the church itself. But that is one of the mysteries of creation is, first off, is there a creation? How does God engage with that creation? And has that changed over time? And you'll find different answers. There are people who believe that there are no modern miracles. There are some who do believe in miracles. I personally, on a personal level, once I open my mind to God, I see his interactions far more numerous and frequently than I ever imagined. I didn't believe in any of them. And now I say, gee, there's a lot of odd things going on. I now see it. So I'm more of the view that he is active in the world, just in a different way.
Well, I agree with that view, as I said early on. And also in my 20s, my life was saved by a voice, an angelic voice in my head that told me to avoid a certain area. And then an ice-covered tree crashed down just as I would have been under it. And so I personally experienced angelic saving of my life. So for me, that leaves no question. But for others,
I have something almost. We just come from different backgrounds. I have something almost similar, and yet I find myself, once a month, I'll be in a phase of doubting, and then I suddenly remember that incident, and I'm like, "What, you idiot? Why are you doubting?" But
right. Well, and I think it's also there's a posture of spiritual openness that has to be present for people to maybe to receive divine inspiration or instruction, or
100%.
Right. Yeah. So if you're completely closed off to that, you're going to think God doesn't exist because maybe in your world there is no influence from God because you're just not able to receive that information. In any case, we're almost out of time here, but Matthew, any final thoughts? Because this has been a really fascinating discussion. I've loved it, but anything you want to end with here?
Just a note that, I wrote this book actually for Protestants. Every Protestant who's read my book has loved it. Don't let the title or anything about it bother you. It is a book about Scripture. It is a question of what is Scripture? How do we prove it? I walk you through the evidence, and at that point, you make your own decision. But the point is that no one had assembled this evidence. That's why I did this work. That's why I'm presenting it today.
Wow.
So I hope people like it.
Well, that's really great. I mean, thank you so much for doing this, Matthew, and also for joining us today, taking time. And I've really enjoyed our discussion. Thank you for being open to some of my questions. The website, folks, again, is canoncrossfire.com. That's CANON in the scriptural context. And then the book also of the same name, Canon Crossfire by Matthew McWhorter. So thank you so much, Matthew. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless. Take care now. All right. Thank all of you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this interview. Fascinating subject. I really love talking with intelligent people who have done a lot of research and to help us understand who we are, where we came from, what's our role or mission in this world. This is all really important information. So check out the book for yourself. And thank you for watching today. I'm Mike Adams here at Brighteon.com. Take care.
Mother Nature provides many botanicals for good health. That's why we're offering you 5 liquid extracts and tinctures that are non-GMO, certified organic, and lab tested for glyphosate, heavy metals, and microbiology. Only at healthrangerstore.com.